Hello, dear students. Today we're going to have a little bit of a different kind of a video because I'm going to be speaking in English, which is not very common on my channel. But I just have started teaching a new Lithuanian beginner group, and I would like to give you a little sneak peek in what we were doing in the second meeting. So I know that a lot of you have some troubles with understanding the cases and how do we use them? Why do we use them? Why do we even have them, right? Because, for example, English does not have cases. So why do Lithuanians have the cases, right? What's the purpose of them? So let's uncover that today in today's meeting. So I would like to give you a short introduction into cases. So for those who don't know much about the Lithuanian cases, the first question is, well, how many cases are there in the Lithuanian language? The answer actually is seven. So we have seven different cases. These cases are called the nominative, the genitive, the dative, the accusative, the instrumental, the locative, and the vocative. So these are the English names, which could be useful to you if you're going to learn some other languages that have cases. For example, German also has cases, Greek, Polish, Latvian, right? So these are international names for the cases. The Lithuanian names are vardininkas, kilmininkas, naudininkas, kalininkas, įnagininkas, vietininkas, and šauksmininkas. So each case has a specific function ascribed to it. Some cases have more functions than the others. For example, there's a primary function and there might be some secondary functions. For example, the nominative serves as the subject of a sentence. So this is how you will naturally find a word in a dictionary, right? It's going to be written in the nominative, and I call it the base form of a noun, right? Like verbs have base forms, infinitives, so do nouns. So, for example, all words, all nouns in the English language are written in the nominative because in English, the endings of nouns and adjectives don't change. So, let's take a sentence saying that, for example, Paulius is a teacher. I could say Paulius yra mokytojas. So, Paulius is the subject. And also, the secondary function of the nominative is that it is also often followed after the verb būti, to be. So, when we're describing the subject, so who is Paulius? Paulius yra mokytojas. So, in this case, the subject, Paulius, and the description, mokytojas, following the verb to be, yra, both are going to be in the nominative. The next case is the genitive. We call it kilmininkas. One of the main functions is to show possession, right? So, like answering the question whose bag is it, right? Kieno čia kuprinė? I could say that this is Paulius's bag, right? Using the apostrophe and s, Paulius's. In Lithuanian, we would change from the nominative to the genitive. Čia yra Pauliaus kuprinė. Instead of Paulius, we have Pauliaus because we're changing the case into the genitive. Now, the dative and the accusative cases are kind of complementary because both of them are used to speak about objects. So there's the indirect object, dative, naudininkas, and there's the direct object, accusative. Now, what is a direct object and what is an indirect object? Let's take, for example, a sentence that Paulius lent a book to Tom. Paulius paskolino knygą Tomui. So in this sentence, we have the subject, Paulius, in the nominative. We have the verb paskolino. And then we have two additional words, knyga, Tomui. So knyga, the object that I have lent to Tom, is the direct object. It's the thing that I've lent him. Whereas Tomui, to Tom, that's the indirect object, or how I often call it, the recipient. That's the person who received the object. So it's the indirect object. So Paulius paskolino knygą Tomui. Now, the instrumental is used to talk about means or tools. For example, let's say I'm in the office and I want to say that I came here by bus. Aš čia atvažiavau autobusu. So in the nominative, in the dictionary, you will see autobusas with the ending as, autobusas. But if I just say autobusas, it means bus. In English, we say I came here by bus. We have a preposition plus the object. In Lithuanian, we don't have to use any prepositions here. We just replace the preposition with the instrumental case. So autobusas becomes autobusu. Aš čia atvažiavau autobusu. So that's the purpose of the instrumental, to speak about the means of transportation in this case, or about tools. Let's say that I write with a pen. So the pen is tušinukas, right? So we'll do the same with autobusas, right? Autobusas autobusu, tušinukas tušinuku. Aš rašau tušinuku. I write with a pen. No need to use the preposition with, because I can just change the ending into o when I'm speaking about tools. So that's the instrumental, įnagininkas. Now let's move to the most straightforward case, in my opinion, which is the locative, vietininkas. The locative is just used to speak about locations where something or someone is. So for example, I want to say I am inside the room. I'm in the room. So the room is kambarys, just as we would find it in the dictionary, kambarys, the room. But I don't want to say aš esu kambarys. That would be I am the room. Very interesting way to identify myself. I am the room. But no, I want to say I am in the room. So instead of adding the preposition in, I will change the ending. Aš esu kambaryje. Not aš esu kambarys. That'd be incorrect. Aš esu kambaryje. That's the one. That's the correct one. So again, why do we have cases? Well, the purpose of grammatical cases is to show the role of a word in a sentence by changing its form. So again, if we had this example here, Paulius paskolino knygą Tomui, right? Every word has a role. Paulius is the subject, paskolino is the verb, knyga is the object, and Tomui is the recipient. So every case has a purpose in the sentence. And it also gives us a lot of flexibility, right? So when we use cases, we can move the words around. We can move them around in any way we wish, to be honest, almost. Sometimes it sounds a little bit odd, but it's still understandable. So for example, let's take these three sentences. Paulius paskolino knygą Tomui. So what do you think? Do these sentences have the same meaning or not? In English, definitely they would have a different meaning, right? But in Lithuanian, because we have cases, as long as every word is in the same case, we can rearrange their place, the structure, and we will still have the same meaning. So Paulius paskolino knygą Tomui, Tomui paskolino knygą Paulius, or knygą Tomui paskolino Paulius. All of these three sentences mean that Paul has lent a book to Tom. Again, as long as the cases and the endings remain the same. If suddenly Tomui becomes into Thomas and Paulus into Paului, we change the cases, well, then the meaning changes. But if the cases are the same, the endings are the same, we can arrange the words as we wish. The meaning remains. And also, as we said before, sometimes they replace prepositions. So if I want to say I'm at home, I would say aš namie. We don't need to use the word at. We can replace it with a locative case. Aš namie. Doesn't work with all of the cases, but it works with, for example, the locative, and it also works with the instrumental often. So let's go and see these situations with verbs. So we talked about the role of a sentence. So that's one of the purposes for the cases. They depend on roles. They also depend on verbs. So let's say we have these three sentences. Butas is an apartment, a flat. So we have three sentences about a flat. Let's read them. Čia yra mano butas, aš noriu naujo buto, aš turiu didelį butą. On the surface, they look very different, right? What makes them different? Well, of course, the meaning is different. Čia yra mano butas, this is my apartment. Aš noriu naujo buto, I want a new apartment. And aš turiu didelį butą, I have a large apartment. In the English language, we will always have a consistent word apartment. But in the Lithuanian language, because we have other verbs, they will force us to use other cases because verbs and cases come in packs. So, for example, when you learn būti, you also learn that it's most of the time used with the question word kas and the following case, vardininkas. So, kas čia yra? What's this or what is here? Čia yra mano butas. So, because I'm using the verb yra, I have to use the nominative. Now, let's say we're changing the verb and we're saying, I want a new apartment. Aš noriu naujo buto. So we have another verb, norėti. Well, this forces us to change the case of the object. So butas becomes buto because noriu. So aš noriu naujo buto. Norėti comes together with kilmininkas. Ko tu nori? Aš noriu naujo buto. And let's see the last one. Aš turiu didelį butą. Turėti ką? Aš turiu ką? Ką tu turi? Aš turiu didelį butą. So turėti, by default, comes with the accusative. Sometimes you might use the genitive together with turėti as well when there's not an exact number. So it's a little bit vague, like aš turiu laiko arba aš turiu pinigų. We're not saying how much time or how much money we have. But when there's an exact number, so in this case, I'm saying that I have one apartment, one large apartment, right? We can identify the quantity. We will use the accusative. And that's how most of the time the verb turėti will be used. So aš turiu didelį butą. So cases depend on verbs. If we have specific verbs, they will be accompanied with specific cases. Same goes for prepositions. So let's say we go to a shop and there's some kind of a discount if you buy coffee with pastry, right? With some kind of a bundle. Let's say you get it €1 cheaper. Good deal in my estimates. So pyragėlis is a pastry. Let's say that I want a coffee with the pastry. So I'd say aš noriu kavos su pyragėliu. I'm using the preposition su, and then I am forced to use the instrumental because anytime I'm using the preposition su, I must use the instrumental case. So aš noriu kavos su kuo? Aš noriu kavos su pyragėliu. So let's say I don't really want the pastry, I just want the coffee. Then I could say aš noriu kavos be pyragėlio. I want the coffee without the pastry. So as you can see, we're using another preposition, be, without, and this forces me to use another case, the genitive, kilmininkas. So aš noriu kavos be pyragėlio. Su pyragėliu, be pyragėlio. The case will depend on the preposition. So yeah, the first case that you're going to learn most likely is going to be the vocative. So when you're speaking to people directly, again, we have different phrases. We have labas, we have sveiki, we have kaip sekasi. When we're saying hello to a person, we don't have to use their name. I can say hi, or I can say hi, Tom. Just the same is in the Lithuanian, it works in the same way. So if you want to learn the vocative, you can try doing this exercise here. So let's say my name is Paulus, but when you're saying hi to me, you should say labas Paulo, just like solus, solo, right? If you're introducing me to someone else, you would say čia yra mano draugas Paulius. This is my friend Paulus, because you're introducing me. But if you're speaking to me directly and saying my name, you'd use the vocative, šauksmininkas, labas Pauliau. So I recommend trying to do this exercise and leave in the comments your variations of the names. How would you say hello to Thomas? How would you say, how are you doing, Marius? How would you say goodbye, Laura? Or excuse me, Dovile? Give us your answers and I will say if they are correct. And thanks for watching. I hope this was useful. I just wanted to give you a very quick introduction into cases. So, once again, just as a recap, there are 7 cases. They show us the relationship between words, they give us a lot of flexibility, and they replace prepositions. And they're also dependent on verbs and prepositions. So, I hope it was useful. Let me know if it was, and let me know if you want more videos like this in the future. So, thanks for watching, and as they say, iki pasimatymo kitą kartą.